Pleasure of welcoming you to the last session of the day. This is above and beyond the latest in investment menu innovations. My name is Jayson Davidson. I am a senior consultant with the Hyas group. I have with me on the panel today Steve Tooel, who is the executive director of the state of North Carolina's retirement systems, where he's in charge of their 401k, 403b, and 457 plans. And to his left is Curran. Curran is the head of defined contribution investment strategy at State Street Global Advisors. So before I turn it over to the panelists today, I want to tie together or give you an anecdote to the session we had this morning with Professor Madrayan. And she tried to distinguish between Homer Simpson related investment decisions and Mr. Spock investment decisions, and it dawns on me that one of the early studies and a driver of a lot of the work around menu design and consumer choice and choice overload comes from a quintessential Homer Simpson type of a study, and it has to do with the sampling of jams and jellies. You can almost picture Homer Simpson drooling at the sight of all these different jellies in front of him. I was going to give you a Homer Simpson impression, but I'm not going to. That particular study, conducted by Sheena Iyengar in 1995, I find interesting. What she did was she set up a booth at a gourmet grocery store in California, and at that booth she had samples of Wilkins and Sons jams, and she, throughout the day, every few hours or so, she rotated between a sample size of 6 different jams for consumers to test and 24 jams for consumers to test. And on average, the consumers tested about 2 each, regardless of whether there were 6 or 24, and they received a $1 off coupon for sampling the jams that they could use to purchase a jar. What she found was, in this study, that the larger display of 24 jams actually drew more people to the sample. About 60% of the store patrons came to the 24 jam display to sample jams, and only 40% of the store patrons came to the 6 jam sample. But where this kind of evolved from there was the purchasing decision. Of those that sampled jams from the 24 jam display, only 3% went on to purchase. Of those that sampled jams from the 6 jam display, 30% went on to purchase. And that study and some that evolved after it, in fact, one of the slides in the professor's study, referenced that the menu choice drove a lot of this. And I thought it interesting, and for those that weren't aware of the study, I wanted to recant it. And anyway, enough about the jams and jellies. At this point in time, I am going to turn it over to our panelists. Our agenda for today, if this...
I think you're good.
What's that?
I think it's on you.
Oh, there we go. Agenda for the day starts with a case study with Steve Tooel, and he's going to go over some of the innovative things they did in the state of North Carolina to drive better participant outcomes. And I'll turn it over to Steve now. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon. How y'all doing? I picked up the word y'all. I live in North Carolina for 6 years. I got it down now, I'm telling you. All right, it's a great word. You're going to want to use it. So a little bit of background on me. I'll give you 10 seconds. I've been blessed in a way that I've have 2 fabulous careers. The first one, I spent 24 years with an industry vendor here that worked with in public sector for a long time. So straight out of school at Ohio State, went there and had a great career. In the last 6 years, I've been fortunate enough to be the executive director of the North Carolina Retirement Systems, one of the one of the premier retirement systems in the country, is what they tell me. So is that right, Melinda? All right, good deal. My board's here, so I got to suck up to them. All right, so North Carolina Retirement Systems, who are we? We're kind of unique in that a lot of states have different executive directors that will run their deferred comp, also may run their defined benefit. A little unique in that we have 9 defined benefit systems. All those report up through our retirement systems. You can see we've got $93 billion in assets. An important point of our 930,000 employees is we got about 450,000 active members, and we have that's from legislators, judicial, registered deeds, public employees, teachers, and on a monthly basis, we're pushing out 310,000 pension checks and pushing with that totals over $500 million. So we have 3 defined contribution plans, a 457, 401k, 403b. We've got about 275,000 participants, $11 billion. Unfortunately, our public servants, America's backbone, we don't get paid great in North Carolina, but they are participating, which I love. And then the North Carolina ABLE program, that's a new program. I won't go into detail on that, but I'm also responsible for that. So it says innovative, but there's been a lot of great plans that have done a lot of these things over the years, probably more than a decade. So, but it's just good to talk about, and I think that a lot of these things will apply for your plan. And we're a big plan, and we bring economies of scale. But I'm telling you that in the right situation, plans under $100 million can do the exact same thing that we're doing here. So don't think it doesn't apply to you, because it does. And tomorrow I think I am moderating the under $100 million cases, so we can talk more about that tomorrow if you'd like to. So let me just show you where we are today. We have an asset allocation service, and we use that with our existing funds. And we don't have true asset allocation funds. We use a service where we pick our funds, and then we've designed a glide path, and then we leverage that glide path to offer our asset allocation services. You can see next we offer a series of passive funds. Now here's an area where our scale really matters. Inside the Department of State Treasurer, we also have the Investment Management Department who manages our $93 billion. We have billions of dollars with BlackRock. So our fixed income fund, our international equity fund, that's BlackRock charges just under 2 basis points. Our large cap equity and our small mid cap is about a half a basis point. So that's where scale matters. So it definitely helps there. You can see too that not all participants want to invest in just passive. So we offer a series of active management money managers. All these funds have the name of the North Carolina Large Cap Fund, the North Carolina Stable Value Fund. So that's how they see it on their participant statement. And they don't necessarily see the underlying institutional money managers, but because they see that name. Specialty options, we don't offer a brokerage, just don't really see the need for it. We don't offer managed accounts. I'm not a huge fan of what the managed accounts out there today are. I think our asset allocation service, which gets more conservative over time and will take them through retirement, I think that there's no additional fee for that, so we don't offer a managed account service. And we do offer a transfer benefit, so folks can take their assets in their 457, 401k, and roll it back into their defined benefit for a lifetime income annuity, and we charge them a one-time $100 fee, and there are no additional fees on top of that. But how'd we get here? Flip the page. So back in 2008, I got there in April of 2011, just so you know. But in 2008, we had 22 mutual funds in the 401k. We had 12 mutual funds in the 457. We had different record keepers. We had a series of asset allocation funds. We had a stable value fund. So in 2009, the board decided to freeze all the mutual funds. And then they also decided to go ahead and create these white label separate account funds, and then leverage the money managers that they're leveraging in the DB plan, plus they picked some others where they had some gaps. And so that's how they went for 2 years. And then in April of 11, when I got there, that's when the board decided to go ahead and let's just move the assets. We shut them off, let's go ahead and move them. And I got, of the 200 or so thousand participants. I got about 10 letters, and I had a couple meetings in my office with upset participants, things like that. But there really wasn't anything major. Our communication plan really worked, and I think it worked well, and there weren't a lot of issues with it. So you can see here there was a tremendous amount of assets, tremendous amount of participants that were involved. But you know, whether it's 300,000 participants that you're moving, or it's 3,000 or 300, I don't think your communication plan changes. I think you've got to have a very robust communication plan, and the behavioral economics this morning was a great lead-in for that. You just got to be really smart about it, and you've got to speak to them. They don't speak your language. You got to be really careful with that. So be smart around who helps you. So why did they go in this direction? Well, we had limited control and ability to really be flexible with our plan. Anytime we wanted to make a fund change, it was a massive communication, right? If you want to change from the Fidelity Contra Fund to the Fidelity Magellan, it was a massive change, a massive communication. So we wanted to get more flexible around that. We also, our fees were higher. We were in a type of a bundled situation, and where they were getting reimbursements back, and we were using those to offset the record keeping. And so I'm not a big fan of that. So I like buying, it's like buying a new car for me. So, you know, the first thing I think, whenever I walk into a car salesman, I'm immediately upset because I know they're going to lie to me. But anyway, so I go in, right, and the first thing they want to do is say, we're going to get you in there for this net number. I'm like, all right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to negotiate what you're going to pay me for my trade-in. And then we're going to negotiate what I'm going to pay for the new car. And I think it's the same thing that people need to understand. What am I paying for my record keeping, and what am I paying for my investments? So that's what we focused on. We focused on getting the best money managers at the cheapest cost that we could get. And then we went out to bid for our record keeping, consolidated, and we drove that price down as hard as we could. And I think at the end of the day, people understand, I'm getting great investment manager oversight at great fees, and then I also understand what I'm paying for record keeping. It's transparent as you can be. Our investment options weren't really customized for North Carolina. They didn't really take into effect, we've got defined benefit plans, Social Security, and we weren't maximizing our talents and really leveraging our economies of scale with our investment management department, and also driving the fees down, knowing that we had all these hundreds of millions of dollars with these folks. So the communication plan was critical. You've got to really be smart around how you're communicating to your participants, to your employees. You got to do it a lot. You got to over communicate. And let me also just say, NAGDCA's listserv. You know, I'm in a lot of different associations with the DB, DC, and ABLE. The NAGDCA listserv is a tremendous asset for all of us. It's great to see us all use it, and there are a lot of great plans across the country that have done this and can share communication materials with you. So be sure to use that. Be specific, but be very clear. Don't use jargon. They do not understand our jargon. Make sure you consider your audience. Consider town hall meetings. That's something that we did. We went, you went to Charlotte, went to Raleigh, went to Asheville, and held town hall meetings, invite people in, so that helped us. The other thing that we have found to be a tremendous asset for us is robocalls. I don't know if you guys know about robocalls, if you use them. If you don't, think about it. It's amazing. We can contact hundreds of thousands of people via robocalls for like $1,500. I mean, it's just kind of stupid cheap. So partner with your DB, partner with them, and you know, they're communicating to your employers, they're communicating to your members. We've got a monthly monitor newsletter, so be sure to get your message in there. Use social media, your web videos on your internet, and then postcards is a great way to invite people to your internet and stuff like that. Of course, you got your newsletters, make sure you leverage those. So what did we achieve? I'm trying to be quick. You doing all right? All right, good. I need a drink of water. Well, we definitely got nimble, you know, knowing that there's a tremendous amount of less participant disruption. So rather than telling them about all this, the name changing is going from here to there, we just simply said, look, we're changing the manager, but they never see the name change, because the North Carolina Large Cap Fund is still the North Carolina Large Cap Fund, but we're hiring the best underlying managers in the world, and we're able to bring that to them. So it's really valuable. Our board was really wanted to be clear around clear roles and responsibilities. They understand their fiduciary responsibility, and by doing this, it really helped us to better define our roles and responsibility. We got performance guarantees out of it with our vendors and our consultants. And we lost that dependency, right, on the 12B1s and the rebates, refunds coming back from the investments. And there was clear transparency around what our members and participants were paying. We lowered our fees to the tune of, that's an incorrect number. We recently just lowered our fees by it was millions of dollars. Just trust me on that, I guess. I can't remember the number. But we just lowered them. We unbundled, and we got $1 million savings out of that, but we definitely lowered them significantly. We streamlined our lineup, bringing less complexity for our participants. The nice thing about that we do, given that I've got the DB and the DC, the cool thing that the state does is that we issue an annual retirement statement, and we have all the data on all the members. We have 450,000 actives. So we issue an annual retirement statement at the end of the year, and then we make an estimate on their defined benefit plan, and we know their salary. We can do that. And then we know if they're in the DC plan. And then we also do an estimate on their Social Security. And it's our goal that they'll be able to replace 80% of their income once they reach age 62. So we issue an annual statement, and it's up or down whether or not they're on track to do that on a monthly basis. And whenever I ask this question to North Carolinians, I always say, how many of the 450,000 active members, what's the percentage do you think is on track to replace 80% at age 62? And the answer is always like 3%, 4%, because they know how much they get paid. But the reality is, this past year, 60.48% of our 450,000 active employees are on track to replace 80% of their income at age 62. It's cool stuff. What we tell them is that of those people who are participating in one of the 457, the 401k, or the 403b, almost 73% of them are on track to replace 80% of their income. So it makes a difference. You got to get them in these plans. I'm really struggling to get auto enrollment. My General Assembly is just not attracted to it. They just don't. We've got some garnishment issues. The other thing it helped us do was just really hone in on our asset allocation. We're big fans of, we know what drives our retirement readiness. It's participation, contribution, and asset allocation. And so in our asset allocation service, we have 275,000 active participants that are participating in these plans. 60% of our participants are in the asset allocation service, and 9 out of 10 of all new enrollments are in the asset allocation service. So we got them buying into the diversity. And then the nice thing about it, with the ebbs and flows of the market, we never see people, and when the market tanks, we don't see them flooding to the fixed, or, they're not doing what they should be doing on an opposite basis. That transfer benefit feature, it's a one-time charge. We only have 867 participants that have done that, about $80 million, so about $100,000 a participant. We did a survey recently to see why we're losing about $300 million a year going to brokers, and they're leaving, going to things like that. And people are taking the money, they're paying down their debt, and they're paying off their credit cards so they can live in retirement. The other thing too, some of them are buying boats, and so, we got tons of water in North Carolina. I got lakes, I got ocean, I got it all. But the other thing we've done is we've created investors, and I think that's the thing that we miss. And I just don't, I'm not sure the lifetime income is going to take off in this. It might once these DB plans, these great benefits start to go away. But I think you're seeing a lot of people living off their defined benefit and their Social Security, and they're using that as their play money or emergency money. We got better relationships with our participants. Our board's happy. You happy, Melinda? All right, good deal. So we strengthened our partnership with our DB, DC, and then the other thing we do is we use our, it's a massive state. From one corner, from the southwest corner to the northeast corner, it's over 650 miles. And so we got 15 reps across there, so we got to be smart. So we use data analytics from the DB plan to help do targeted messaging, and I think that's critical. I got to speed up. So we launched a 403B plan. I'll tell you, the public school district 403B plans, if you ever think about getting that, talk to me first. So they're tough. They're tough to get into, tough to break into. We need some legislative changes from our federal government. We rebranded. We did unbundle this past year. So like I talked about, we know what everyone's doing, who's responsible for what, and we can hold them accountable. So that's been really good. Our focus since this change, we consolidated our record keeping on the 403B. We now have everything with Prudential. The whole multiple provider thing. I know, being in the industry when I was on the industry side, I know a lot of plans looked at that as being, hey, well, I'm offering diversity and diversification. And I think what you have to think about, what you have to balance is diversification is good, but when you're giving up your economies of scale and not driving your fees down, you got to understand that, and there may be some risk with that you're going to have to balance and weigh. But I'm always a big fan of driving the fees down because I think at the end of the day that keeps me out of an orange jumpsuit. So that's a good thing. So further simplification in 2017, we got rid of the large cap growth and large cap value. We think the large cap area is not an efficient market. It's hard for active managers to make money there. So we combined it to just be, it's primarily now an index fund and on the asset allocation service. We do have an active manager. We combined it, so it's all good there. And we're doing the same thing with our small mid cap growth and value. What's next? We're finalizing our glide path. That'll be effective in June of next year. We're going to take it from to retirement to through retirement. We're really putting a focus on passive in our goal maker, our asset allocation product, but we're also got some active in there as well because we think there's opportunity to give our participants some value. We're putting in a TIPS fund to help with inflation. Continue to leverage, lower fees, and then we are modifying our ABS, our retirement statement, to help them understand the great value of being a state employee because they pay for retiree health care and Social Security and all that good stuff. I pushed one too fast. So lessons learned, remove complexity, increase value, push on fees. You just can't do it enough. Advocate for auto features. I think that's the best way to get stuff done. Know your fiduciary obligations. Look at these lawsuits that are out there. They're real. My wife's in one, and it's funny, they got sued, and 2 weeks later she got a letter saying, hey, good news, we're going institutional money market. I'm like, you're a little late for that. But keep effective documentation. Make sure, your fiduciary, your process is critically important. Document your process and make sure that you know that you can pull that documentation if you ever get audited or get sued. Focus on what's best for participants. One of the best things we've ever done, and we do it both on the DB plan and the DC plan, is we leverage a partner called CEM benchmarking. It's the best $25,000 we spend. They come in and they benchmark us against similar plans, and a lot of the plans are right in here. And I know how I rate relative to my fees, my investment options, my investment management fees, the services that we offer, and we just had that presentation, our board meeting last week, and it's really nice. So I would encourage you to reach out to Alan Torrance at CEM. I'm not paid for them, but it's from a fiduciary perspective, it's a nice thing to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Brendan, give him as much time as possible, and allow time for Q&A at the end. Thanks for allowing me to talk to you.
Great, thanks, Steve. My wife would probably say that I like to think I'm Homer, but I'm probably Spock, so I apologize if my humor is not as good as Steve's. So I want to talk about two things today. I want to talk about innovation and retirement savings, why we're all here, but also recognize the last speaker, it's been a long day. Let's keep it kind of fun and also talk about innovation in automobiles, innovation in the driving industry. For that, let's start off with a little bit of an exercise. I'd like you all to read this sign for me. Now, with a raise of hands, how many people would say they had a difficult time reading that sign? I've read it about 50 times. It still takes me 1 or 2 times going through it to actually get through it. What's this about? Well, it's about distraction and the dangers that distractions can be as individuals are on the road driving. In the United States, there's more than 5 million accidents in any given year. 80% of those accidents are due to driver distraction. What does this have to do with retirement savings? Well, individuals saving for retirement, investing for retirement, are also burdened by distractions. It's called life. The employees that we serve, they have a day job. They have a home life. As Steve talked about the jargon, that's not their day-to-day living. And so how do we make retirement saving or retirement investing easier for these participants, smooth that retirement journey? And at the same time in the automobile industry, you've seen innovation make driving an easier endeavor. And so look at the innovations, the evolutions of the automobile industry. Some of us started driving, you had that manual transmission. You're at automatic transmission now. You have the airbags, you have anti-lock brakes. I've got this thing where my steering wheel buzzes every time I stop paying attention and drift into another lane. I am one to admit I am not a very good driver. With the DC plan, you've seen that similar innovation evolution with the overarching goal to make it easier. We started off with unlimited choice, unlimited flexibility for the participants. But we now know, based on behavioral science, we need to make it easier for them, streamline that investment menu, limit the number of options, the choice architecture, that Bridget Major was talking about earlier. Further, focus on the default, focus on that target date fund or the Goalmaker product that North Carolina offers, that set it and forget it option to make it easy for participants. As I look across this room and I think about the folks that I've met, many of these best practices you may already be implementing. And so I'd like to spend the remainder of my time focusing on the future and talking about some innovative ideas that maybe not all of you have yet to implement. And for that, I want to stress the importance of testing conventional wisdom. When I grew up, there were, let's call it, quite a few rules in my house. 2 of the ones that stand out is you don't get into strangers' cars, and you definitely don't meet people from the internet. Today, the click of a button on my phone, I summon strangers from the internet to get into their cars. So I ask you, with DC plans, the plan designer, the investment menu, how can we utilize innovation to improve outcomes while testing the bounds of conventional wisdom? And let's start by talking about technology. How could technology be utilized to improve engagement? Well, let's draw the analogy back to ride-sharing apps for those that use Uber or Lyft. What they offer is an improved user experience. Again, with the click of a button on my phone, I can see what car is going to come, what the name of the driver is, how long it's going to take to get to my destination, and what the cost of that trip is. What's the analogy to a DC plan? Well, for a DC plan today, participants look at the retirement savings and often see an account balance, $20,000, $40,000, $100,000. But does that tell them how far they've come and how far they have to go to be ready for retirement? Not necessarily. And so in the future, could we utilize technology to start breaking down those account balances and showing income projections to plan participants? If they're used to seeing a monthly paycheck as they accumulate, could we start to put it in the context of a retirement paycheck? And furthermore, use technologies from record keepers to integrate retirement income calculators. Start making small changes to their day-to-day lives and see how that could influence their ability to achieve retirement when they want. Second, we know employee engagement is important, and you can drive positive behavior. I go back to that Uber analogy. The Uber studies cite that through Uber, drunk driving accidents are down 6.5%. But how we can take it a step further is automate the journey. For those of you who read The Economist, it seems like it's an article in every magazine, every issue, is this talk of self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, automating that, removing me from the road, is expected to reduce accidents by 90%, reduce damages and healthcare costs by over $190 billion. Transformative in terms of that automobile industry, how we get to and from a place. How does it apply into a DC plan? Well, this is probably the simplest analogy, and many of you are considering it or applying it today, and that's automating the accumulation phase. Automatic enrollment, automatic escalation, and automatic investing. I'll go out on a limb here because I think I have an extra minute, and I like to use analogies even though my colleagues make fun of me for it. We have a client in Ireland, as I think about those things, participating, saving, and investing. They compare a retirement savings plan to a pint of Guinness. It seems fitting for brewing up retirement success. The body of the Guinness is getting them in the plan, getting them saving at the appropriate rate. That foam on top, which is my day-to-day job, is the investing. And so that automatic enrollment, automatic escalation, so important to improving outcomes. And so as we look at DC plans today, we see the opportunity to embed those solutions and drive better outcomes. But there's still a challenge. Think of that individual in that DC plan. We've helped them accumulate assets through these automated features, but they reach that point of retirement in the context of a DC plan, and they're faced with a longer life expectancy, and they're left with the challenge of converting that DC balance into drawdown amounts. So not only looking at it from an income projection perspective, but what can you safely withdraw in every given year to not run out of money in retirement? In speaking with participants and surveying participants, we know that 80% of them express that a guaranteed monthly payout benefit is a must-have. Further, 2/3 of them expect their employers to help them plan for retirement. That is, when we've moved past accumulation into decumulation, participants still want and need your help. As it relates to the practical design of the plan, we would advocate consideration for what we call next generation default fund. Whether it's a target date fund or something like a goal maker solution, look for a solution that pairs accumulation with decumulation. That is, automatically transitions participants into a drawdown strategy that provides liquidity and flexibility in those early years of retirement. When we know some individuals will continue to work, some of those individuals, as in the state of North Carolina, will go buy a boat. And then pairing that with guaranteed income in those later years of retirement, providing that backstop and that certainty. That to us is true full automation in that investing landscape. Finally, let's consider about aligning choices with values. Today, there are more than 6 million electric cars on the road. Those electric cars, the attraction to them, where they weren't there 5 years ago, reflects this societal change, and especially among younger consumers, a desire to adopt technologies, to adopt solutions that align with their ESG beliefs. And it has societal benefits as well. Electric cars are expected to reduce carbon emissions by 2050 between 45 and 77%. And it's significant cost savings to them in terms of charging an electric car versus filling it with gas. Again, how does this relate to retirement savings? Well, consider that over the next 40 years, baby boomers will transfer $41 trillion of assets to millennials. And studies show, much like millennials seek to apply their ESG beliefs to decisions outside of the plan, they may seek to apply them within retirement savings plans. And that is 22% of millennials are more likely to invest in companies targeting social or environmental goals versus 12% for that broader audience. And so today, where investments might overlook ESG factors, and they might be a secondary or tertiary benefit to the primary offerings that are in a DC plan, think about the future where some of these ESG beliefs could be incorporated into the DC plan menu, incorporated in the investment options. I'll be so bold as to say incorporated into the default. And take that a step further to say there's technology that exists today that would allow you to report on ESG metrics to those individual participants. How have they reduced their water consumption or their carbon emissions through their investment decisions in those retirement savings plans? So as I close, and I have 2 slides to close, I apologize. Maybe I've gone even faster than Steve has, so double apologies. Well, 1, innovation improves outcomes. Whether it's through technology, where we consider the benefit of income projections. These statistics come from study on the thrift savings program, so the DC plan for federal employees, where when they started to show income projections on individual participant statements, they saw 12% increase their contribution rates. 29 took some general form of action that is drove engagement through this technology, or through automation, where you see significantly higher participation rates in those plans with automatic enrollment versus those plans without. And taking it a step further to consider concepts like retirement income, decumulation into the design of a default. To ESG, I didn't put this last part together, but I love this simplicity of it. ESG is big, and it's going to be a growing consideration for a growing population, a growing percentage of the employees that we all serve. And so we were asked in some respects, we have 2 key takeaway slides, but if I had a key takeaway slide, it would be this one. And this is a checklist. It's meant to inform areas that you as plan sponsors could consider pursuing and exploring as you look to evolve the DC plan. I ended on a high note. I don't have a concluding statement, so thank you.
So I pressed these guys so much on time as we were preparing for this that they finished extra early. We have plenty of time left over for Q&A here, and there should be microphones roaming the room.
No questions.
I'll start with one, with a show of hands question. How many plan sponsors in the last, we'll say the last 5 years, have gone through some sort of menu reconstruction that has resulted in a simplification of the menu? So not just switching one fund to another, but reducing and so on. Pretty good showing. And let me go a step further from that for those that know. With a show of hands, those of you that have today a menu with, let's start with 25 or fewer funds, raise your hand. If I drop that to 15, how about if I drop that to 10? Okay, there's a couple with 10 or fewer funds. Any with less than 5, I'd be unique for sure, but certainly gets discussed. Is there a question? I thought I saw a hand up, but maybe you're just saying, get on with it. Oh. There's a question over there. Here's one.
In the tone of your voice, at least I heard in the tone of your voice, maybe having fewer than 25 is a good thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the question had to do with the number of funds, and you recall that chart that's being referenced is a chart that comes from that Sheena Iyengar study that I referenced in my jams. In any case, yeah, I guess the short answer to your question is I would suggest fewer than that 25 or 28 that show up in the study. There's a little bit more nuance to that 25, 28 in the results of the study. That was kind of the area of where incremental return or marginal utility at that point stopped. As you go on and add funds beyond that, your participation suffered and so on and so forth. But yeah, in essence, you don't need 25 funds. She went on to say as much. You don't need 25 funds to create a diversified portfolio, right? And no, that's it.
The other thing I would say that the beauty of these white label funds is that a good example is there are funds that we have, like the North Carolina Large Cap Fund. We'll have 3 managers who's trying to do certain things so that when they blend it together, it's a nice portfolio. So even though it's one option at the participant level, there's 3 underlying managers that we're managing, and I think simplifying the choice is the way to go. If you look at the federal thrift plan, it has like 5 or 6 options, and that's it. I don't know if you want to go that low, but that's another beauty of the white label approach. You get the diversification, but you don't get the extreme complexity for the participants.
One more little comment on that. I would guess if you looked in detail into your participant menu and lineup, you'd find, for those that have 25 funds or more funds or 15 funds, that the concentration of assets and participants ends up being in a lot fewer than that, right? In most cases, we see 80 to 85% of total plan assets, even in the larger menus, end up being in about 10 of the funds.
Hi, Norm Knoll from San Bernardino County, California. A question to Steve. In your discussion, you went over a lot of material about changes that you had implemented in North Carolina. And I got a little lost in what you consider the primary reason for the increase in participation and contribution rates that you saw, the dramatic increase, frankly, of what you've seen. Was it due to the white label funds? Or was it due to a greater educational effort by your staff, as you indicated?
Well, I think it's a balance of reducing complexity and making it simple. And I think our asset allocation service makes it simple for them to invest. And then we've seen a tremendous uptick in the number of. One of the things we're seeing that it kind of gets back to some of the legislative report out is that plan sponsors, large cities and counties, are joining the North Carolina state retirement systems plans because they understand the fiduciary standards that we participate. They understand we've got a board of professionals and we've got it all covered for them. And there's lawsuits in North Carolina that's pending, and it's the counties and cities that are in those immediately shut down all the other vendors and said, we're just going with the state retirement system. And I think those types of employer additions really helps us spike up our numbers. We're far from where we need to be. Make sure the vendor knows that they need more, they got more work to do. But we're making progress. I'm pleased with what we've been doing. There's a question over here somewhere.
Okay, thank you. So maybe this question is for anybody on the panel, but so I think the question around white labeling or the benefits of it, simplification is certainly one of them, but another potential benefit is to take advantage of opportunities and asset classes that maybe you wouldn't otherwise put on the DC menu. Can you talk a little bit about how that consideration plays a role in how you're developing these portfolios, and to what extent have you, or are you thinking about including asset classes that you would never include just on a standalone menu, but you can in a context of a broader portfolio?
Yeah, you definitely could do that inside these white label funds. We're going to take it a step further in phase 2 of our glide path work, in that we're going to, our investment consultant sees opportunities for us to invest in, but we don't want to put those as standalone options on our core menu. So phase 2 is probably a year or two out, but what we will do is when people invest in asset allocation, they will get provided the board approves and all that, which we still need to talk to them all about. But the plan is to be able to incorporate those non-traditional asset categories so that we can provide a much more pure asset allocation. So we think that is a tremendous opportunity without a lot of risk. We are risk averse in North Carolina, so we don't think it's taking tremendous risk. So I absolutely think that's a great point and a huge benefit of these white label funds.
Todd Myler, State of Nevada. Really appreciate all the presentation, the innovations, the new ideas and things. And in talking with my program coordinator, it's obvious that we have some political things we need to overcome in order to be able to do certain things, like auto enrollment in the state of Nevada. Perhaps, Steve, if you could maybe address maybe some of the political obstacles that you may have had to deal with, maybe give us some ideas on how to do that as well.
Yeah, I was really impressed with this morning's presentation. Kudos to Keith and the board for bringing her in, and some great ideas there. In North Carolina, I've been there 6 years, I've tried 3 years, and it's we've got the anti-garnishment rules, right? The laws, we got to get around that. You just can't take money out of someone's payroll. So we would have to, it requires legislation. And what we have, they don't want to, they think of it as like, I don't want to be big brother. And these are decisions they should be making themselves. It's been a very, and the other thing too is that, I work for an elected official, and that would be a heavy, that would be a heavy lift. And I've never been a political person, and I'm learning about it, but I'm not a big fan of it, by the way, but you find out that they'd have to cash in a lot of chips in order to get that done. And my board is all about it, and they ask about it all the time, but it's just not been the right time and the right General Assembly. I would encourage you to speak to, I think there's a few out there that have been successful. Jayson, you may know some, but I would encourage you to talk to them. They're probably better than me, because I've not been successful.
Hello? Yeah, so thanks again. So my question is more on your guys' experience with unbundling your plan, right? Yeah. And Stephen, you and I have talked about that before, where you're a huge advocate of that if it meets the criteria. So can you expand a little bit on, for all the rest of the plan sponsors, when are those triggers or those benchmarks where, unbundling certain aspects of your administration or your plan would be advisable? Like what are some of the triggers with regard to assets under management and things like that?
Yeah, I think it varies. And Jayson, I think, would be a great input on this as well. But I think it varies. My experience from my previous life was that, if you have a large average participant account size, I mean, if the average is what, Jayson, probably 30 to 40 probably in the industry, somewhere in that. Yeah. So if you're double that, you've got enormous leverage, and you can work with your vendor, and you can get some things done for your plan. So I would encourage you to think about that. And but I've seen plans under $100 million unbundle, and I think it's the way to go. I look forward to the day when plan sponsors send out RFPs and they say, this is the investment lineup you're going to administer. Tell me what the fees are for you to record keep that and that alone. And I think that's where we need to go, because I think the plan sponsors at the end of the day are responsible for the investment lineup. So, but under $100 million, it can happen. But if you got a $20,000 average account size, you don't have a lot of scale. You're going to struggle. But just get the best deal you can get, and push on fees, go out to bid all the time and work with Jayson, and there's a lot of great consultants out there, so leverage them.
What about the service and education?
Service and education, for me, it's absolutely critical. This business is a relationship business. It is so, I'm sorry? Unbundling it. I think it's critical because what we had was, every vendor, whether it was when I was a vendor or other vendors, make mistakes. But when you're bundled, I couldn't see through who made the mistakes and who was responsible and hold them accountable. But now that we're unbundled, it's really clear to me who's doing what I'm paying for what, and I can justify what we're paying for and what service we're getting. And the board likes that. They love that transparency. And for me, it's just a great way for the board to meet their fiduciary obligations. So I would encourage you to look at it and think about it. We were way late on the game for unbundling. I mean, we probably should have unbundled 10, 12 years ago.
I think the threshold is even further below 100 million. You can unbundle today through a pretty concerted effort to go out to search or bid or renegotiate much smaller plan. And by unbundling, just to reiterate, Steve's talking about, and the questions to some extent are kind of decoupling the different service components. Generally speaking, unbundling is talking about decoupling the record-keeping function, the plan servicing function with the investment function. That's pretty commonplace, even for plans as small as 25 million and below. What you might consider if you don't have the scale to drive, competitive pricing with a completely unbundled menu is something where you've become comfortable with, I'll pick a fund, the target date suite product is an acceptable product, it meets your investment policy criteria, but what you've added to the contract is, in the event that we have any problems with this particular product that we weren't able to unbundle, your pricing is not allowed to change if we decide to move it out of the plan. It's one way from a fiduciary perspective you might be comfortable with decoupling the investment decision from the servicing decision. I don't see as much unbundling of other service capacities like education and on-the-ground stuff for smaller plans. It's just doesn't seem to be in the cards from an economy standpoint as you might have from a larger plan. Yeah. Geographically so I don't see it as much that you've had a third-party service provider providing the education and communication pieces. That's usually remains the domain of the record-keeping and service companies.
That's what we did.
Suzanne Olson with the City of Tempe. I have a question more for Brandon, and I guess it's more behavioral. I really enjoyed your analogy with the cars. As we talk about going through retirement, not just to retirement, we're going to have more millennials. And I guess the thought occurred to me, at the City of Tempe, we actually have representative from the retired population that serves on our defined contribution board. So we're going to have, with millennials, we're still going to have the baby boomers actually through retirement that are still going to keep their monies in the plan that we're going to engage with them. So my question, I guess, Brendan, but to the others as well, is how do you balance now a more diverse population, and how do you keep engagement of those that are already retired now from the public sector, communicate with them, and engage with them in retirement?
Yeah, I think that's, excuse me, it's a great question, and I think it's a question that there's today really no perfect answer for. But I think it's important to acknowledge how critical it can be for a plan to retain those assets. I mean, Steve hit it time and time again, and I'm a vendor, but it is a scale business. And so your ability to keep those retirees in the plan longer, where they are afforded the benefits of the plan's entire scale, you're also porting their scale, their assets down to benefit those millennials that are starting with much smaller contributions, much smaller balances. Where the industry needs to go, though, to address those retirees' needs is to make sure that investment menu that today is really oriented around accumulation is also favoring those individuals in decumulation. It's our philosophy at my organization that could occur within that default investment fund solution, but there are others in the industry that are talking about this concept of a retirement tier. So offering a suite of menu options within that investment menu that are really oriented to those individuals seeking to draw money out of the plan. If the tools aren't there for them to utilize and utilize properly, we would argue they're more exposed to being taken out of the plan through financial advisors or brokers that are positioning themselves as that ultimate investment solution where you stand ready and capable of pulling some of those solutions into the plan to keep them there.
I would add, too, that I think it's a great question. We're seeing in North Carolina, it's a huge gap. I think as an industry, we need to move more towards separate communication, separate website, separate materials for our retirees to attract them and retain them. Because the reality is they're not going to get a better deal than the deal they're getting with their state retirement system. So we see it. The one thing I will say that we're doing that is working is retirees love Facebook, and they got the time to do it, right? So they're playing their games, Candy Crush or Crush, whatever it is, and so they get after that. So I would definitely leverage that, but I would challenge our industry and our industry partners we've got to find a way to try to retain these assets, and I think marketing and communication is the way to go there, because they all believe, we're retiring 20,000 people a year, and they all think they have to move the money out because that's what they hear from brokers. And that's just not the case. So we got to communicate more effectively. Hang on. There's a guy behind you. Yeah, so question is composition of my board. I got 9 board members. The treasurer's ex officio. They're always on. There's a person that is appointed. Melinda's appointed by the Senate Pro Tem. There's a House Speaker gets appointed. And then there's the governor has the rest, and he has to appoint an active member, a retiree, and then other folks that from the public, but they all have to have either finance or investment experience.
Hi guys, sorry. Thanks for the good panel. I think this question is for Brendan, but certainly any of you that have had experience with this. It's about ESG, the environmental, social, and governance factors in investing, which of course is a huge trend of many institutional investors looking to incorporate some ESG into their plans. Recently, one of our clients had made the point that every manager that they talk to on the fundamental side will either say, yeah, we agree to ESG factors, or we're a dedicated ESG manager, or the natural part of our process takes you to companies that naturally think about being thoughtful about environmental, social, and governance factors. The interesting point that was made was basically the only thing that's left then is passive and factor-based strategies that fund everything that falls in every other category. And the point was being made that plans are being confused by a lot of mixed messaging today. I should care about ESG, but yet I should take part of my assets passive. Is this something you guys are getting questions about, like which is it? Because the passive funds all the non-ESG kinds of companies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does, and I'll defer to Jayson and Steve too to see what they would add. As we think about ESG investing, what we would argue is it's really important to look in trying to ascertain guidance from the plan participants that you're serving. That is, as I walk through the slides, the story around the ESG and the case for ESG comes from a belief and an understanding that millennial investors want to incorporate those ESG beliefs into their investment decision making. It's not necessarily, it's not for any other purpose except to try and provide an option that is more well aligned with the participant beliefs. In terms of how that is implemented, passive and active, I think you're starting to talk about different layers of that pyramid. ESG could be active, ESG could be passive, ESG could be single asset class, ESG could be multi-asset class. there's a proliferation of choice to consider when you're evaluating ESG. The argument that we would make from a plan perspective and from an innovation perspective, recognizing it's not for everybody, is that in certain populations that you're serving, there may be participants that would desire those options, and we see that as furthering, making the benefit more competitive. I don't know, Jayson or Steve, what you'd add from a consultant or sponsor perspective.
I don't know of any, I could speak to our clients anyway, and I'd venture to say not many have entire menus that are driven by ESG factors. And while I do agree with you, the discussion around ESG has been pretty pronounced lately. The implementation and focus on lower cost and index-driven has been much more pronounced, and that implementation does take place. I suppose you could look forward to a potential structure that gave a diversified index-based ESG strategy. I mean, there are ESG, index products out there, but they don't cover every single asset class. So I don't know that there's a solution that gives you both right now. I don't know that the conflict is all that, has been all that great for my plan sponsors anyway.
From my perspective, in North Carolina, I would say that we as a plan sponsor, we have one task, and that is to do what's in the best interest of our participants. And I think whatever you do, you just always have to keep that at the forefront. And I think that's critically important. I think we're getting the hook.
I think that's time. Thank you again for your participation here. And